I just wanted to thank you all for joining us. Appreciate it so much. Here we are, another end of the week, if you will, but the week continues on. Whether we're on the air or not, we've got Paul Ryan possibly resigning. We've got other big issues, but I want to start with something that happened a couple days ago, and because it's always great to start this program. If you want to get in on the phone lines, if you want to talk about a topic, it's always great at the beginning of the hour, as they say in the business, the top of the hour at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. And especially on a Friday when people are getting ready to check out, people are moving into town. The only people that are not relaxing are the folks in retail, right? The folks in retail. This is their Super Bowl. I was talking to a young man last night, and he goes, don't they folks realize that this is the holiday season, and during the holiday season, you're supposed to be nice? And that means to folks in the service industry. Look, I don't want to sit here and be on the soapbox and such. That was me about 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago. But, here we talk about faith and family and freedom and the spirit of giving. And I don't know if it's the fluoride in the water. I don't know if it's too much cholesterol, if it's our diets, if it's our lifestyle, if it's this online stuff. But we get stressed out so much quicker than we used to. Larry David did a thing on Curb Your Enthusiasm where he's in the shower and he's trying to get the soap to work, the liquid soap, and it wouldn't work. You just start screaming. We just go from passive to instant rage back to passive again. It's almost as if we're not evolving, we're de-evolving, if you will. We see that at work. We see it everywhere else. I don't know what the solution. Well, I do know what the solution is. At 580-5436, 580-KIDO. It really comes down to treating others as we would like to be treated, the golden rule. And maybe the older we get, the more and more that rule comes into play on how we treat people and how we would like to be treated. If we're truly in it to be a giver, to help others, to follow in God's path, well then, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, then we should truly have empathy, we should have patience, we should have some understanding. And even when you open the door and they walk in, they don't say anything, or they're so self-absorbed, well, that's on them. We don't have to go to their level now, do we? All right. Enough of the touchy-feely warmth and understanding for your listening pleasure. We're going to start with what happened a couple days ago when Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein was testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. We start with Congressman Labrador, who, by the way, if I were someone that liked to stir things up, and maybe we should throw this out, if Speaker Ryan goes, why not Speaker Labrador? Well, Kevin, he wants to come home. Kevin, he wants to help Idaho. I understand that. But you could take a look at Congressman Labrador or Congressman Jordan from Ohio. Now, you talk about a Congress that would follow the will of the people. You couldn't do any better than those two. But let's take a look. Now, remember, Rosenstein's the guy that decided that we need an independent prosecutor. Rosenstein's the guy that decided that he's going to not appoint one to investigate Comey. The FBI agent, apparently he was having an affair with someone who wasn't his wife. I guess that's why they call it an affair. And just the shenanigans going on. We've got the Wall Street Journal calling for an investigation of the FBI. It seems that everybody wants to investigate this phony, fake Russian dossier that triggered the independent prosecutor and the little whiny Comey who was leaking, except Rosenstein. Let's take a listen.
Chairman, thank you, Mr. Rosenstein, for being here today. I shudder at some of the questions from the other side, and I just want to ask you a quick question. Have you ever said that you are the president's wingman?
No, sir.
Has the current Attorney General of the United States ever said that he is the president's wingman?
Not to my knowledge.
But yet, the Attorney General under President Obama said that he was the president's wingman, and I never heard a single Democrat object to that. So it's kind of ridiculous to sit here and try to question your integrity or trying to question whether somebody's going to be loyal to their president or not. As you clearly indicated, you can be both loyal to the Constitution and to the President of the United States. As long as there's not a conflict of interest, as long as you're not doing anything that is inappropriate, it's okay to be the president's wingman. It's also okay to say that you're going to be loyal to the president as long as they're not asking you to do anything that is illegal. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So, what was the goal of the Russians when they tried to interfere with the elections in the United States?
The assessment of the intelligence community, as reflected in their public report, is that the goal of the Russians was to undermine American confidence in democracy.
So, to undermine the Americans...
That's what I'm paraphrasing, Congressman. I don't have it in front of me.
So they try to undermine the public faith in the U.S. democratic process. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
I believe that no one in the United States has done more to undermine the belief in the United States democratic process than the Democrats and the press in some cases when they continue to report on false allegation after allegation after allegation. In fact, what you see from the Democrats is that they move from one allegation, that allegation is proven to be false, and they move to the next one, and they move to the next one, and they move to the next one because they're unhappy with the results of the election. Can you tell me why the independent counsel was actually appointed?
The special counsel, Congressman, I've explained publicly that I appointed the special counsel based upon the unique circumstances in order to promote public confidence, and I have nothing to add to that.
So why, when Mr. Mueller was charged with investigating, he was charged with investigating, quote, any links and or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of Donald Trump, and any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, end quote. That charge is overly broad, but there's been two prosecutions, or at least two charges so far brought by the independent counsel. Is that correct?
4 individuals charged, 2 pleaded guilty, and 2 will stand trial.
Have any of them been charged with any links and or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign for President Trump?
Congressman, the charges speak for themselves. I'm not going to comment beyond what's in the charging documents.
By the way, you're listening to KIDO Talk Radio. This is Congressman Labrador talking to Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, depending on the part of the country you're from. And the point he's trying to make here with this Obama holdover, we'll just call him Rosenstein for right now, is that there is no collusion. The Democrats and the press continue to try and want to overturn this election. I guess they want to give the president a lump of coal. Never mind that tax reform, historic tax reform, is going to happen today.
But is there anything in those charging documents that there was a coordination between the Trump administration and the Russians?
Congressman, I'm not going to comment beyond what's in the charging documents. I think you can draw your own conclusion.
So something I do agree with my friends on the other side is that we should get to the bottom of, we should know the truth. We should know whether there was collusion between Russia and the President of the United States. We should also know whether there was collusion between any department who tried to interfere with our elections. So can you tell me, was there collusion between the DOJ and Fusion GPS to use a Democratic-funded document for political and legal purposes?
See, and this is what it comes back to. You have this document that apparently, what originally it was the Washington Examiner during the primaries. They dropped it. Then the DNC got it together. They funded it. Somebody took it to the FBI. These 2 agents that hate Donald Trump, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, that apparently were having not only texting fits about the president, but, an affair, put this together, cleaned it up, got the FISA court to investigate President Trump. So when people say, well, why did the president not trust the FBI? Well, there's a good reason. They were going to get him. And remember, we're talking about the Obama administration, an administration that prosecuted and went after James Rosen, the folks at the Wetumpka Tea Party, the IRS under Lois Lerner. This is crazy stuff. I would rather have a guy or a lady that the press and people don't like, don't understand, say, oh, you can do better than that, than what we had with Mr. Obama and possibly Mrs. Clinton.
I don't know the answer to that, Congressman. I would simply point out that the language I actually used in the appointing order was coordination, and I believe that was the language used by Director Comey when he publicly testified about an ongoing investigation. I did not use the word collusion.
Okay. So that coordination, was there any coordination between the DOJ and Fusion GPS to try to undermine an election of the United States?
If there were, Congressman, I'd be very concerned about it. As you know, there are ongoing reviews, and I'm not in a position to comment about that.
So there are ongoing reviews, so there could potentially be an investigation whether the DOJ and members of the DOJ actually colluded with an enemy of a political party and a political candidate to undermine the elections of the United States.
If there's any evidence that warrants it, Congressman, we'll do what's appropriate.
All right. So I think if you want to restore the trust of the American people, I think the Department of Justice has a duty to give us all the information that we have been asking for. We need to find out who started this investigation. We need to find out what the purpose was. If you have an individual who actually had a desire to have an outcome in a political race, and they decided to use the Department of Justice to investigate their political opponents, I think that is one of the worst crimes that has occurred in the history of the United States when it comes to politics. Do you agree with that?
It would, if that were what happened, Congressman, it would certainly be of great concern.
All right. Well, I hope that you are truly investigating this and that we get to the bottom of this. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Well, there we have it from Congressman Labrador, but let's face it, they're probably shredding the files even as we speak. It's not as if these guys are going to turn themselves in. Now, coming up next, Jim Jordan, the Republican from Ohio, simply loses it. And here's where you come in at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're hearing the testimony. You're hearing the questioning. And to me, I don't think the Deputy Attorney General really gets it. I don't think that he respects the folks in Congress. And it goes back to, remember, under Obama, you had Eric Holder, you had Loretta Lynch that did whatever they want. Now, clearly, when we heard about Donald Trump, we've got to investigate Donald Trump. We've got to make sure there was no collusion, right? Okay. Well, if that's the case, then why aren't we looking at this phony dossier? Sean has been covering this nonstop, and he's right. This is something that is very, very big and very troubling. We'll take your calls on this, and then we'll hear from Jim Jordan. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. All right, now it's about ready to get really good here. Congressman Jim Jordan laying the smackdown on the Deputy Attorney General. Let's take a listen.
I recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, for 5 minutes.
Did the FBI pay Christopher Steele, and was the dossier the basis for securing warrants at the FISA court to spy on Americans associated with the Trump campaign? Really, when you sum it all up, it boils down to those fundamental questions. Did you pay the guy who wrote it? And did you use what he wrote, disproven, discredited dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign? Did you use it to go get warrants to spy on Americans? That's what it comes down to. And you're the guy who can answer those questions. And yesterday I was convinced that the answer to those questions was probably yes. But today I'm even more convinced the answer is yes, based on the text messages we got to read early this morning. Mr. Rosenstein, you know Peter Strzok? You familiar with that name?
Yes, I'm familiar with the name. And
former deputy head of counterintelligence at the FBI? Peter Strzok, that one?
I don't know his precise title, but yes, he had a significant role in...
Peter Strzok ran the Clinton campaign, interviewed Mills, Abedin Clinton, changed the exoneration letter from gross negligence to extreme carelessness. Peter Strzok, who ran the Russian investigation, interviewed Mike Flynn. Peter Strzok selected by Mr. Mueller to be on his team. That Peter Strzok, we learned, had all these text messages. We got to read some of them early this morning. Now, as my colleagues have pointed out, some of them are, they show he didn't like Trump. He and Miss Page are exchanging text messages back and forth, show they don't like the president. But that's nothing new. Everyone on Mueller's team, no one on Mueller's team likes Trump. We already knew that. But I want to focus on one in particular. one in particular. And this is a text message from Mr. Strzok to Ms. Page, recalling a conversation and a meeting that took place in Andrew McCabe's office, Deputy Director of the FBI, recalling a meeting earlier. And Mr. Strzok says this: I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office. Then there's a break. Dash, it says that there's no way he gets elected. No way Trump gets elected. He says, I want to believe that. You said that in the meeting in Andrew McCabe's office. I want to believe that. But then he goes, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. Now, this goes to intent. He says, we can't take the risk. The people of this great country might elect Donald Trump president. We can't take this risk. This is Peter Strzok, head of counterintelligence at the FBI. This is Peter Strzok, who I think had a hand in that dossier that was all dressed up and taken to the FISA court. He's saying we can't take the risk. We have to do something about it. Now, don't forget the timeline here either, Mr. Rosenstein. Peter Strzok, January 10th, he's the guy who changes the exoneration letter from gross negligence, criminal standard, to extreme carelessness. July 2nd, he's the guy who sets in on the Clinton interview. July 5th, 2016, that's when Comey has the press conference and says, we're not going to prosecute. Clinton's okay, we're not going to prosecute. And then August 2016, we have this text message. The same month that the Russian investigation is opened at the FBI, August 2016. And my guess is that's the same month that the application was taken to the FISA court to get the warrants to spy on Americans.
Remember, Jim Jordan, congressman, spelling this out, that the government was spying on Americans at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, against the will of the people, based on documents rustled up by a political organization. You have people in charge of an investigation saying they have to do something to stop Donald Trump from being elected. This is what's going on. And this is what you're not hearing in the press. You're not hearing it on any other radio station in the Treasure Valley. You're not seeing it outside of Fox News. And thankfully, we have the time here that we can thoroughly give you Jim Jordan breaking this down on KIDO Talk Radio. More from Congressman Jordan in a minute. Time for traffic and Kevin Miller here. Our time is 6:26. Let's get back to Congressman Jordan grilling the Assistant Attorney General. You know, the guy that triggered the special counsel.
Using this dossier that the Clinton campaign paid for, Democrats paid for, fake news, all dressed up, taken to the court. So I got really just a couple basic questions. Because it seems to me if the answer to any of those two questions, if the answer is yes, if you guys paid Christopher Steele at the same time the Democrats in the Clinton campaign were paying, or if you took the dossier, dressed it all up, took it to the FISA court, and used that as the basis to get warrants, and now we have intent in this text message saying, there's another text message, my colleague referenced it earlier, where Mr. Strzok says, I can protect our country at many levels. Says it with all the humility he could muster. I can protect our country at many levels. This guy thought he was Super Agent James Bond at the FBI. This is obvious. I'm afraid we can't take that risk. There's no way we can let the American people make Donald Trump the next president. I got to protect our country. This is unbelievable. And I'm here to tell you, Mr. Rosenstein, I think the public trust in this whole thing is gone. So it seems to me you got two things you can do. You're the guy in charge. You're the guy who picked Mueller. You're the guy who wrote the memo saying why he needed to fire Comey. You're the guy in charge. You could disband the Mueller special prosecutor, and you can do what we've all called for. Appoint a second special counsel to look into this, to look into Peter Strzok, Bruce Orr, everything else we've learned in the last several weeks.
Yes, Congressman, and I can assure you that I consider it very important to make sure the thorough review is done, and our Inspector General is doing a thorough review. That's how we found those text messages as part of that review.
You've given that answer like 15 times. Let me ask you this.
You've given that answer about 15 times. By the way, if you're just tuning in, this is Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio grilling the Deputy Attorney General over the texting, over the dossier, over everything else that the FBI, the Department of Justice, will not release. What are they hiding?
Are you concerned? I mean, this is what a lot of Americans are believing right now, and I certainly do, that the Comey FBI and the Obama Justice Department worked with one campaign to go after the other campaign. That's what everything points to. Think about what we've learned in the last several weeks. We first learned they paid for the dossier. Then we learned about Peter Strzok. And last week we learned about Bruce Orr and his wife, Nellie. I mean, this is unbelievable. So what's it going to take to get a second special counsel to answer these questions and find out, was Peter Strzok really up to what I think he was?
I think it's important to understand, Congressman, we have an inspector general who has 500 employees and a $100 million budget, and this is what he does. He investigates allegations of misconduct involving department employees. That review that he is conducting is what turned up those text messages. It will also involve interviews of those persons and of other witnesses.
So we're looking forward to his report, and we've met with Mr. Horowitz, and we're anxiously awaiting that report. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that the country thinks we need a second special counsel. 20 members of this committee, the Judiciary Committee with primary jurisdiction over the Justice Department, thinks we need a second special counsel. All kinds of senators think we need a special counsel. What fact pattern do you have to have? What kind of text messages do you have to see before you say it's time for a second special counsel?
I want to assure you, Congressman, as I think the Attorney General explained, we take very seriously the concerns of 20 members of this committee.
See, he doesn't answer it. He doesn't answer it. So we've given you the information, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about it. We'll have more from this hearing that is so important. We're sharing it with you today, but we are taking your phone calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug. And the problems for ESPN continue. According to a new story from the Boston Globe, the way they handle females that are pregnant, not very good. We'll have a chance to talk about this. And, are we rewiring society at all if, with all these allegations that continue to be proven true again and again and again, when we're taking a look at how people behave, what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. And like I said, there's a big story in the Boston Globe today. You can simply go to my Facebook, Kevin Miller Show, and you can take a look at that story about people behaving badly. And now little old Matt Damon is yapping about Harvey Weinstein and others and what he did and didn't know and everything else. Crazy, crazy times. Even, what's his name, Supersize Me, Moreland Spurlock is in trouble. Joining us now from Fox News Radio to take a look at, the year that was and some of the more searched items. Tiny J. Powers joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, I'm trying to think, finger widgets or something? Would that be one of the most searched items, maybe?
Are you talking about fidget spinners?
Yes, finger widgets, yes. That's it.
It's not a finger widget or whatever. No, that would be fidget spinners, and yes, that was on the list of most searched items by Google this year.
Finger widgets. I have to remember that one. We always have the year-end stuff. Anything that jumps out at you?
Most of them, were pretty expected, I guess. I mean, you had the searches for Harvey Weinstein, of course. You had, I think the most searched one was Hurricane Irma. Matt Lauer was on the list right below that. Also in there, Tom Petty, who we lost, in October. The Super Bowl was on the list, Las Vegas Massacre, the solar eclipse, the fidget spinners, as you were saying. As far as the most searched people, also on that list was Meghan Markle. She was also the most searched actor of the year. She is, of course, now engaged to Prince Harry. We learned just about half an hour ago that they will be marrying in May, on May 19th. Well, they've got a date now. The most searched movies, It, Beauty and the Beast, and Wonder Woman. And the most searched TV shows included 13 Reasons Why, Game of Thrones, and This Is Us.
I've watched one of those.
Which one have you watched?
Oh, come on. You have to. That's an easy one.
Are you talking about TV or movie?
TV. Movie, none of them.
TV Game of Thrones.
Oh, of course, yes. Now, if This Is Us, there'd be a lot of. I think you'd think perhaps even that might change your impression of me if it was This Was Us or This Is Us or.
Why?
I don't know. That's a touchy-feely show, and Game of Thrones is about dragons and this and that, and the other is about life. See,
Well,
you notice with Tanya J. Powers, she doesn't have to say anything to get you talking. That's just part of the bag of tricks that these folks have.
You're right. Those reporters and their bag of tricks by asking people questions, they're just
A friend of mine,
sneaky like that.
A friend of mine once was interviewed by Mike Wallace, and it was the most fascinating experience of his life because I said, "What was it like? Did he grill you?" He goes, "He said very few words. Just kind of like you did. Why?" And people just jump on that. Now, what that has to do with Google in 2017, I don't know. But here we are. It's that time of year.
You seem to be sounding a little uncomfortable with this. Are you okay?
I'm just trying to.
Okay, now that was a trick. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist that one.
And I fell right for it. I'm like, dab, 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 dab. Sometimes you hit the nail on the head. I'm bab, bab, bab. Anyway. Yes.
I think that I always like to look at the most searched list, though, because it really does remind you kind of, oh yeah, that's right, that happened this year too, because some of this stuff was way back at the first of the year. And, let's face it, it's been a busy news year. We may have forgotten.
And probably still could be.
Yeah, there's still time left. So, who knows?
Who knows, indeed. I'm just glad that you took that segment and kept going, because after you said you seem to be having trouble with this, I
I figured it was the least I could do.
I appreciate that. So I was trying to think of anything else going on. But news-wise, buzz-wise, of course, we'll have, we've already had we've talked about this before, the person, the people of the year. The hashtag MeToo continues. Are you shocked that so many people, or that this continues to garner so much attention? And are we looking at possibly rewiring the whole fabric of our relationships, considering we have Matt Damon now, we have the story about ESPN, we have everything else. It's, who's next, it seems.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not surprised that it still continues.
Mm-hmm.
At all. I think it will continue. I don't think we've seen the last of this by any stretch. And there are a lot of people who, still will come out and tell their story, and that kind of thing. I think the Morgan, you mentioned Morgan Spurlock, the Super Size Me guy. Reading up on his story, I was reading that earlier this morning, and he has a different take on things. And I think we're going to see, even more men come out and say the kind of things that he's saying. Because he says, he's not the first one to say, well, I remember it differently, but that's usually how it's kind of couched is, I remember it differently. That's not the way I remember it. He gets really specific in his story about what he remembers from, the allegations against him and what she says. And I think that's kind of interesting. Will it rewire the way that our fabric works of dealing with men dealing with women and women dealing with men? Who knows? A lot of people would say, let's hope so. It still remains to be seen. But yeah, we've not heard the end of all of these. Definitely.
Yeah, indeed. Of course, the Selma Hayek story. Oof.
Yeah.
That was something.
And it's like I keep saying, and whenever I have this topic and to discuss this on the air, these are just the women that we've heard of. There are a lot more of them that, we don't know their names. We don't watch them in movies or on TV or haven't heard of them, and who have stories just like this or worse.
Yes, and we started with finger widgets.
We did. But, hey, we finished strong, so I think that's good.
Time J. Powers, we appreciate you, and thank you for keeping us informed.
Anytime. Thanks.
Bye-bye. All right, let's go to Hank in Boise with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Hank.
Good morning. I was listening to that congressional testimony and everything else, and you're actually questioning one of the rats in this. He's one of the deep state. I mean, this guy was very much involved in the cover-up of Uranium One when Hillary's involvement, racketeering in this, and it sure speaks a lot about the Democrats' lack of front bench talent. They had to go through all these illegalities to protect her. You would think they would have a better candidate, and why put their risks of their own reputations and stuff on the line for a woman who obviously was a crook?
Right.
It shows you a lot about the state of the Democratic Party. And the thing that bothers me a lot is he's using this Inspector General thing to buy for time. This is a stalling tactic, and let's hope that the Inspector General isn't another member of the deep state. I don't know that as a fact, but I do definitely know Rosenstein is, and Rosenstein is one of the rats. I mean, that's like asking for honest answers out of Willard the Rat. I mean, he should be out in his ears. And my last point before I get off the line, why should Sessions is going to have to toughen up, or Trump has got to fire him. They got to get rid of this Rosenstein and get rid of these people, these holdovers, and clean the Justice Department out. And Sessions may be a nice gentleman. Maybe he's honest, personally honest as the day is long, but he isn't tough enough for the job.
Well, who would be tough enough?
Well, they better. I'd almost be practically tempted to put Mr. Jordan of Ohio in that position. If he was qualified, he would definitely be that. Sounds to me like he would be tough enough to do it.
Well, Jordan isn't holding anything back, and we'll have Trey Gowdy's comments in a minute. However, at 580-5436-580-KIDU, let's get back to this, Hank. I mean, they've called this guy out. We've got the text messages. As Jim Jordan said, let me just read them to people if they're just tuning in, that, they're saying we have to stop him. I want to believe the path you threw is correct, but we have to stop him. They're talking about a candidate, and this is Strzok to his girlfriend, talking about stopping a presidential candidate. Let's see. I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected. But I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. Now remember, Hank, you're a good guy. I'm a good guy. But not everybody can be an FBI agent. Not everybody can do this, right?
Oh, I agree with you, but it shows me two things. One, that these guys live in their own bubble or their own world, their own separate reality. I mean, when I listen to this whole thing, first thing, a reaction I got out of it is this guy hasn't met reality 101 yet.
But you see the arrogance. Doesn't he remind you of when Obama was in and they didn't care what Congress did because they were above reproach? They were above accountability?
Because Obama and all these liberals have a self-righteous, sanctimonious view of themselves, and the attitude is that the ends justify the means. So they're above because their motives and they're so pure. You can't. It's always to a good end. So if you have to skirt the law or do what you can to subvert the law to get to the end, that's justified because the goals are so noble.
Hank, you stay warm, all right?
I mean, that's why I get out of stroke.
All right. You stay warm, okay?
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye. Coming up, Larry Gebert talks a little bit more about the weather. A little snow coming. How much? We'll talk about that, get your thoughts. But back to what you're hearing here. And if you're just tuning in, we'll hear from Trey Gowdy in a moment, grilling Rosenstein, and a funny story. Sometimes, well, why don't we start with this one? Husbands sometimes find themselves in hot water with their wives. I wouldn't know anything about that, and I'm sure you wouldn't as well. But a Florida man is facing, the wrath of two wives, both of whom want to see him put behind bars. Merry Christmas.
49-year-old Paul Wayne Stout's wives may get their way. They want him locked up for marrying them both. The Flagler County, Florida Sheriff's Department is accommodating their wishes. They're charging Stout with bigamy for, they say, marrying a woman in Florida 4 years ago while still married to a woman from Indianapolis. Detectives say Stout and wife number one split in 2005 but never got a divorce. Stout, by the way, is a registered sex offender. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
Well, some guys just are born running from behind there. Didn't know about the sex offender status, but I guess you can't get too much of a good thing, right? Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
KIDO.
We roll along here. And who doesn't like Katy Perry? Is it Christmas time yet? Before 7 a.m. Let's get to this. Trey Gowdy grilling Rod Rosenstein over conflicts in the special counsel investigation.
I ask you about, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. We had a terrorist incident in New York this week. We have 702 reauthorization that is pending in Congress. Gun violence, the opioid epidemic, criminal justice reform. But when I go home to South Carolina this weekend, trust me when I tell you, no one is going to ask me about any of those issues. They're going to ask me, what in the hell is going on with the Department of Justice and the FBI? The reason we have special counsel, this is a very important point, and you know it, the reason we have special counsel is because of a conflict of interest. The regulation itself specifically makes reference to a conflict of interest. And we don't like conflicts of interest because it undercuts people's confidence in both the process and the result. So let's be really clear why we have special counsel. There was either a real or perceived conflict of interest that we were fearful would either impact the result or people's confidence in the process. That's why we have something called special counsel, and that's why we have special counsel in this fact pattern. And then lo and behold, those who are supposed to make sure there are no conflicts of interest seem to have a few of their own. There's a senior prosecutor who sent obsequious emails to a fact witness. She can be described as nothing other than a fact witness. She's a really important fact witness if you pursue the line of inquiry that my Democrat friends want to pursue. They got off of collusion and now they're on obstruction of justice. She may be the most important fact witness in an obstruction of justice case. And the senior prosecutor for this conflict of interest-free special counsel sent a fawning, obsequious email to a fact witness. And then we have prosecutors assigned to conduct this investigation who donated almost exclusively to one candidate over another. And then we have a prosecutor assigned to this conflict of interest-free team that attended what was supposed to be, what he'd hoped to be, a victory party for Secretary Clinton. And we have a senior DOJ official, Mr. Deputy Attorney General, with an office that used to be 2 doors down from yours, meeting with Fusion GPS. And Fusion GPS, of course, was paying for Russian dirt on the very person that they're supposed to be objectively investigating. And then that same senior DOJ official's wife, the one that met with Fusion GPS, his wife was on the payroll of Fusion GPS. And then we have a senior agent assigned to investigate Secretary Clinton's email, help draft the exoneration letter. Well, we changed the language from grossly negligent to extremely careless.
By the way, you're not listening to C-SPAN on the radio. You're listening to KIDO Talk Radio. And this is, again, a feature that we're doing today where we had the House Judicial Committee grilling the Deputy Attorney General over why there is not a special prosecutor concerning Fusion GPS and everything else about the phony, fake Russian dossier.
Interviewed Secretary Clinton in an interview I've never seen, and I doubt you have either in your career as a prosecutor. Interviewed Michael Flynn, was actively involved in the investigation into the Trump campaign before the Inspector General found his text. So this agent, in the middle of almost everything related to Secretary Clinton and President Trump, sent pro-Clinton texts, anti-Trump texts to his paramour in response to being told maybe he is where he is to protect the country from that menace, Donald Trump, he said, I can protect our country at many levels. And then he said Hillary Clinton should win 100 million to nothing. Now think about that, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. That's a pretty overwhelming victory. 100 million to 0. And when I read that last night, what I thought was this conflict of interest free senior agent of the FBI can't think of a single solitary American who would vote for Donald Trump. That's where the 0 comes in. Not a single solitary American he can imagine would vote for Donald Trump. This is the conflict of interest free special agent assigned. And then he went on, if that weren't enough, to belittle Trump supporters by saying he could smell them at a Walmart in Virginia. This is the person we needed to avoid a conflict of interest. And then he said this, they fully deserve to go and demonstrate the absolute bigoted nonsense of Trump. But he wasn't content to just disparage Donald Trump. He had to disparage Donald Trump's family. This is what he said, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. He said the douchebags are about to come out. He's talking about our First Lady and children, this conflict of interest-free special agent of the FBI. This is who we were told we needed to have an objective, impartial, fair, conflict of interest-free investigation.
Now remember, these are the same folks that are going after Michael Flynn, that are going after Manafort, that have all the collusion. So this proves that these folks are not objective. And some of the language that Trey Gowdy said in that congressional hearing, we're a family-friendly show. We're a family-friendly station. We just, again, dumped that. We don't believe in that type of language, even if it's coming from a congressman. But if this does not call, I mean, where are the Republicans right now as the Democrats have done with Donald Trump?
So he's openly pulling for the candidate he had a role in clearing, and he's openly investigating a candidate that he has bias against. And then if that's not enough, he says Trump is an effing idiot. What the F just happened to our country? This is the same man that said he would save our country. What happens when people who are supposed to cure the conflict of interest have even greater conflicts of interest than those they replace? Well, that's not a rhetorical question. You nor I nor anyone else would ever sit Peter Strzok on a jury. We wouldn't have him objectively, dispassionately investigate anything, knowing what we know now. Why didn't we know it ahead of time? And my last question, my final question to you, and I appreciate the chairman's patience. How would you help me answer that question when I go back to South Carolina this weekend?
Congressman, first of all, with regard to the special counsel, Mr. Strzok was already working on the investigation when the special counsel was appointed. The appointment that I made was of Robert Mueller. So what I'd recommend that you tell your constituents is that Robert Mueller and Rod Rosenstein and Chris Wray are accountable, and that we will ensure that no bias is reflected in any of the actions taken by the special counsel or in any matter within the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice. When we have evidence of any inappropriate conduct, we're going to take action on it. And that's what Mr. Mueller did here.
Do you believe him? KIDO Talk Radio, traffic and weather together. And coming up, we want to hear from you, plus Fox News. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning.